Hey guys, so I'm continuing my reading of the book of Ecclesiastes. This is at chapter 7, and with a bit of kind of glossing through the text with a bit of commentary. Better a good name than costly oil, the day of death than the day of birth. So at this beginning of chapter 7, he talks about a name is better than costly oil. The costly oil, kind of think something like nard, a very expensive kind of aromatic oil. People would use it to anoint themselves, protect them from the sun after a bath, and so they would smell good. So it's kind of like the sense of the superficiality of perfume, for example, saying, well, a person who smells good versus somebody who's really stinky. And would you rather a very stinky person who actually has a good reputation, or someone who has a bad reputation and smells good, right? So he's saying, well, a name is actually better. It's less vain. Now, a name in the esteem of right-thinking members of the community, for example, those members of the community may be mistaken about that character or that reputation, but it is still somehow less vain to really live that character than mere kind of appearances at first glance. Costly oil might also refer to precious oils, such as the oil used to anoint a king, which is obviously recognized by the community as a very meaningful symbol of them becoming a king, and also possibly personally meaningful for the king, or the oil used to anoint a priest, and they will offer sacrifice. The oil running down the beard of Aaron, or the oil used to anoint a prophet as they receive the Spirit to prophesy. Again, a good name is even better, right, to really live that character. Okay, so it's better in the sense that it's less sort of superficial or less vain. The day of death than the day of birth. So again, on this strand, the day of death does bring sort of seriousness to it, that we are considering death, we are remembering the end of all people, we're remembering our own death, and in the day of birth, maybe we could forget that. While it can be kind of foreshadowed in the crying of a baby, something like that, it's really in the day of birth that we remember the vanity of life. Better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. Earlier in the book, Ecclesiastes commends eating and drinking, and as a gift of God. But of course, there'll be eating and drinking in the house of feasting. But in the house of mourning, there may be eating and drinking there too. But again, we're remembering this is real. The kind of more sorrowful aspect of life kind of reminds us of the wisdom. So there's some nuance here. Reminds us of the context of our eating and drinking. We're not just getting lost in that food and drink, right? We're remembering the wisdom. Better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting, for to this end all men come. Let the living take this to heart. Better sadness than laughter. A severe face confers some benefit. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, the heart of fools in the house of gaiety. Now this is, this is a common figure of speech we'll see throughout Ecclesiastes. He's not saying that if a person is in the house of gaiety that they're necessarily a fool. The Koheleth himself describes that he kind of explores all areas of life and engages in them to discover wisdom, but it's kind of helping us to form a sort of attitude. He's saying the heart of fools is in the house of gaiety, right? Kind of like, be careful here, right? Better attend to a wise man's reprimand than listen to a song sung by a fool. For like the crackling of thorns under the cauldron is the laughter of fools. This is vanity too. Better attend a wise man's reprimand. I gave an example earlier of a teacher calling me, my slippery logic, something like that. My thinking was not so good. And I had another experience of a teacher saying, Simon, why did you continue to write this paper after 2 pages? If you had just written the first 2 pages, I would have given you a really good mark. But because you continued to write, it just got worse and worse, and I have to take away marks because of that. Everything you said is just such trash and so worthless that I have to take away marks from your paper. And that was tough to hear. It was not a pleasant experience, and I'll admit that's a big reason why I didn't pursue a PhD, is because of that experience. Very negative. But in a way, I look back on that, and that reprimand, while painful at the time, I see the value of that too. Just shut up. Nobody wants to hear my opinions, my thoughts, my analysis. When I'm writing emails, keep it short, just, stuff like that, right? So there's something to that. Reprimand can hurt at the time, but it can also improve us. But the songs of the fool, the praise of, the short-lived praise, the crackling of the thorns. When thorns burn, they kind of make loud noises and they burn out quickly. So the pot might boil quickly, and then the thorns burn out. So it's not making the broth in the cauldron really cook properly. The laughter of fools. This is vanity too. For laughter makes a fool of the wise man, and merriment corrupts the heart. I'm not too sure where this is coming from. Could be the sitting in the company of scorners, maybe something like Psalm 1, mocking people, you fool, laughing at people. That's making a wise person into a fool to do that, right? And merriment corrupts the heart. This word corruption, of course, we think of like a corrupt apple, like something that's rotting. Corruption usually is also used in the context of bribery. Merriment corrupts the heart. That a person has kind of a legal obligation to perform certain duties, and accepting benefits for doing those duties, is a corruption, right? So merriment is corrupting the heart. Better the end of a matter than its beginning. Better patience than pride. So there it is. Better the end of a matter than its beginning. Seems quite kind of pessimistic, but in a way that life has already been lived. That person has achieved their purpose in life, whatever that might be. We don't necessarily know. But the end of it kind of shows forth its fruit, what it was all for. It's achieved the end, and now it's kind of reached its completion. So that's better, right? It's the day of death, the mourning, the reprimand, rather than kind of this exciting beginning of hope and fun and frivolity. Better patience than pride. Also, pride here is maybe thinking that a person knows what that purpose is and being like so sure of themselves versus kind of waiting and finding out. Do not be hasty with your resentment, for resentment is found in the heart of fools. Again, not saying that if a person has resentment, they're necessarily a fool. It's giving that attitude. Resentment is found in the hearts of fools, right? Resentment is something so dangerous. It can eat away at relationships, cause bitterness and unhappiness throughout a person's life, right? Do not be hasty with resentment. Do not ask why earlier days were better than these, for that is not a question prompted by wisdom. There I think of, default mode network and maybe some research on people who tend to think about the past more often. When they're not thinking about anything else, when their minds are kind of aimlessly wandering, thinking like, oh, the past was so much better, right? Association with depression there. And also, I think he's saying we can't really know what happened in the past, while we can sort of perhaps theoretically come to some conclusions about something that's been completed. We don't necessarily know all the details, that the past might have had just terrible things that happened that we don't know about. So asking, why was the past, kind of ignorant, what's the word? Reminiscence or nostalgia. Wisdom is a precious legacy, a boon on those whom the sun shines. For as money gives protection, so does wisdom. And the good that knowledge imparts is this: its possessor finds that wisdom keeps him safe. So wisdom is a precious legacy. So he's comparing wisdom to a sort of inheritance, that a person might be born into. And it's a benefit for all on whom the sun shines, not even necessarily just that individual. Wisdom gives protection, and knowledge imparts this. The possessor finds that wisdom keeps him safe. So here, I think maybe the idea that's coming out is that a person who is wise, who is contemplating, whose heart is in the house of mourning, who is contemplating these serious questions like we will all die, like there is no purpose, like if I try to rely on a purpose, it eludes me, like it just grasps like the wind from my grasp. I can't really catch it or rely on anything. This somehow protects us from the experience. Instead of just kind of coming out of the blue and kind of hitting us across the face, potentially like destroying us, there's some sort of cognition that, hey, I got to be a little more careful here, enjoy it, but keep in mind this wisdom. It keeps us safe, not to be like relying on things, right? Consider the work of God. Who can set straight what he has made crooked? When times are prosperous, enjoy your happiness. When times are bad, consider this. The one is God's doing. The other, in order that the one is God's doing, as is the other, in order that man may know nothing of his destiny. Okay, so who can set straight what God has made crooked? There's a very kind of transcendent notion of God, kind of theology in this book of Ecclesiastes. God is like a very far off power, if you will. It's like something that's so beyond. God is in heaven, we are on earth. God sets things straight. God makes things crooked. When times are bad, this is God's doing, in order that we may know nothing of our destiny. I think the image here again is like, if I knew that tomorrow there would be some kind of horrible event, like a war where I live, and then I would be separated from my family and never see them again. If I knew those bad things were going to happen, what would I do? How would I spend time with my family? What would I really do with my time there? And he's sort of saying, look, we don't know our destiny, what good things might happen, what bad things might happen. So when things are good, enjoy it. And remember, like, we can't plan for everything. We can't know everything. We can't rely on that. In this fleeting life of mine, I have seen so much. The virtuous man perishing for all his virtue, for all his godlessness, the godless living on. Do not be over virtuous, nor play too much the sage. Why drive yourself too hard? Do not be wicked to excess, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? So his conclusion from bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people, is don't be over virtuous because it's very difficult, and don't be too wicked because it can lead to destruction and death. Now, there may be many reasons why over virtue could be very difficult and kind of not worth it. One is perhaps scrupulosity. When a person becomes very scrupulous, they try to think about every little detail, trying to make everything perfect. Like, oh, I can't do this. I have to do this. Oh my gosh, I had this thought that was like incorrect. Now I have to I'm a terrible person and I have to correct that. And what can I do? And they kind of develop sort of a disordered mind, kind of an insanity of sorts, trying to be virtuous and good, which is a very difficult suffering actually for these people. And I'll say the general wisdom on that point is that such people require a strong hand to avoid consulting with too many people. So the people who are scrupulous tend to go to many people for advice and be like, what should I do? What should I do? And they kind of need to find someone who says, hey, get this under control. You're coming here. We're going to figure this out. We're going to work through it together. And, don't go to anybody else. Just let's stop this here. But over virtue can also cause bitterness. we see this example where someone finds virtue very difficult and painful, and they somehow feel like they've missed out on life. They're not happy at some level with virtue. There's many stories about this. And begin to become very judgmental of others, jealous, be like, hey, these people didn't follow the rules, and they're having so many good things happening in their life. And so there's that kind of judgment and hatred. It can also be an example of excessive justice, for example, where someone is too exacting with justice becomes cruelty. Do not be over virtuous or play too much the sage. Like, oh, I'm so smart, I'm so wise, and I have all this guidance, right? Why drive yourself too hard? Do not be wicked to excess. This is a bit of irony, I'll say, maybe an irony on this saying. Like instead of saying, oh, don't do bad things, don't do wicked things, he's saying, don't be too wicked. He acknowledges that everybody does, even God-fearing people, will do wicked things and have guilt. So when you do wicked things, not if, when you're doing wicked things, it can be comforting, first of all, to know that the Bible says don't be over virtuous. First of all, that's kind of nice. But the other thing is don't go to excess, right? Like don't let yourself go in that wickedness. It can, someone might find you out in that moment of kind of extreme wickedness, and there can be punishments. There can be all kinds of causes of death, even destruction, what he's saying. The best thing is to hold to the one and not let go of the other, for both of these will happen to the God-fearing man. Wisdom lends more strength to the wise than 10 rulers in a city. There is no virtuous man on earth who, doing good, is ever free of sin. Another thing, pay no attention to telltales. You may hear that your servant has reviled you. Your own heart knows how often you have reviled others. So, it's not fair, it's not just if people are saying bad things about me, and I'm going to monitor them and find out everything that they're bad saying about me. I'm going to worry about that. He's like, whoa, chill out a little bit. First of all, deal with yourself. You have certainly thought bad things about other people, said bad things about other people. First, kind of deal with yourself. And, again, there's that hypocrisy, right, of becoming bitter and judgmental about others through over virtue. And then the truth is, of course, we have all, done wicked things. I have put this to the test by wisdom, claiming to be wise, but wisdom has been beyond my reach. Reality lies beyond my grasp, and deep, so deep, who can discover it? All right, so Kohelet is saying that there is a wisdom, but it's so profound, so deep that it's kind of a question. Like, okay, well, if this guy couldn't figure it out, he was apparently a very incredibly wise person, maybe the most wise person, right, in this story, but he could not penetrate wisdom fully. So he's sort of saying at the same time, be critical of what I'm about to tell you, or what I'm saying. But also be a little critical of yourself too, right? Once again, I was at pains to study wisdom and retribution, to see wickedness as folly, foolishness as madness. I find woman more bitter than death. She is a snare, her heart a net, her arms are chains. He who is pleasing to God eludes her, but the sinner is her captive. This then you must know, says Kohelet, is a sum of my investigation, putting this and that together. I have made other researches too, without result. One man in 1,000 I may find, but never a woman better than the rest. All right, can you say patriarchal, misogynistic, yeah, and why is Kohelet so disturbed by the evil in women? It's kind of what's going on here, right? I'm not trying to answer that question. I have no idea. There you go. I can think of a couple of examples One is going to be from the context itself, son of David, king in Jerusalem, story of Solomon with his 700 wives and 300 concubines. He goes and there's a story that some of his foreign wives, he was very, we wanted to have all kinds of experiences in life. So some of these women he married and got together with, they were bugging him a lot and being like, hey, we want to set up temples and shrines to our gods also, so that, on all the hills we have these ashrams and shrines we can pray and sacrifice to our gods too. And they just bugged him and finally he's like going crazy. He's like, fine, do whatever you freaking want. And they go and Solomon regrets that after. He was like kind of bitter about that. So we see here, this is like a kind of a bitter guy, right? He's a bitter old dude. And, but, maybe there could be other references to, Delilah and Samson. Delilah is, the nets and the chains, how she caught Samson, by seducing him and bugging him until he finally told the secret of his strength to her. There's some, maybe in Revelation, the whore of Babylon or something like that, or whatever, right? But I think, Koheleth is this bitter old man. And he's seen so many ships, with beautiful sails going out to sea and, they're shipwrecked. And he's seen so many hopeful beginnings and ends in like terrible things and love, falling in love, and the relationship ends in incompatibility and basic unhappiness ultimately, resentment. And it's like, so he's kind of disturbed, by the evil of women, which, yeah. And to compare that to men all on top of it, saying, maybe one in 1,000 guys is okay, right? Like, come on, like, all right. This, however, you must know. I find that God made man simple. Man's complex problems are of his own devising. All right, so that's something I can probably get on board with. Devising, the word is like a machine, like some sort of military device, something like that. We have, really he's saying like human beings are simple. Like we all want happiness, but people come up with all these social conventions and rules, and we make life quite difficult for ourselves. That's fair enough. All right, I'm here on chapter 8 now. Who is like the sage? Who else can solve a problem? The wisdom of a man lends brightness to his face. His face, once grim, is altered. All right, so when he talks about wisdom like this, I'm thinking of the theme of wisdom and gentleness, which actually I know shows up a little later. A saying, like a wisdom saying, like, if the king's anger rises up against you, do not leave your place, for gentleness assuages great wrath. Right, so he's going to talk about wisdom and kind of conformity with the king. This I say, obey the command of the king, for the sake of the oath of God. Do not rashly transgress it, and do not be stubborn when the cause is not a good one, since he acts as he thinks fit. For the word of the king is paramount, and who dare say to him, why do that? The king here, of course, this is son of David, so presumably he's the king writing this or saying this, but seems to be a foreign king that the people, his audience, have made an oath to God to obey this foreign ruler. So he's saying, for the sake of your oath to God, obey this king, even if he's making some stupid commands. And he who obeys the command will come to no harm, and the wise man knows there will be a time of judgment. Do not rashly transgress the king's command. Probably that oath to God is kind of, he's saying there's a limit on it. Like if the king commands something that is in direct conflict with the law of God, perhaps you would transgress the king's command. But basically, you got to obey it. You made an oath to God, for better or worse, that you're going to obey the law, so obey it, even if it's a stupid law. There will be a time of judgment, so you're not going to come to harm if you only obey the law. You won't get punished, I guess. And there will be a time of judgment. So he's going to talk about what is this judgment. We've just been talking about good things happening to bad people and bad things happening to good people. So what is this time of judgment on this king? For there is a time of judgment for everything, and man runs grave risks, since he does not know what is going to happen, and who can tell him when it will happen? No man can master the wind so as to hold it back, nor control the day of death. There is no discharge in time of war. No more can wickedness set its author free. All this I observe as I consider all that is done under the sun, whenever man tyrannizes over man to his hurt. So the judgment here seems to be that wickedness cannot set its author free. So here the word free is used as a sort of maybe idea, concept as an ideal, as something desirable or good, something like happiness. Freedom is like this experience maybe of happiness. And the wicked cannot experience this freedom. Maybe that's the judgment right there. He also talks about not being able to control our death or know when the outcome of the king's command will become clear. Like maybe it was a good decision, maybe it wasn't. We don't know when we're going to find out about that decision, right? But he does see a judgment, and I'll say it doesn't seem to be a judgment after death. Maybe the person's memory rotting or a person being forgotten in the land of the dead, perhaps. But generally here, there seems to be a judgment in this life, as it were. And then I see the wicked brought to burial, and people come from the temple to honor them in the city for having been the men they were. This too is vanity. Since the sentence on wrongdoing is not carried out at once, men's inmost hearts are intent on doing wrong. The sinner who does wrong 100 times survives even so. All right, so this is another example of vanity, of judgment, or a judgment not being executed quickly. So this could be the judgment of the king, the command of the king, not being executed quickly on the evildoer. This could be perhaps a tyrant themselves who dies, and then people honor them instead of saying, "That scum, finally he's dead," right? So this encourages people to continue doing evil. The wrongdoer does wrong, the sinner does wrong 100 times, and this is vanity. So this is not something we can rely on, either side, either to say, if a person does a bad thing, God will punish them. How can you rely on that? We don't see that. That's not the fear of God he's about to talk about. Oh, God will punish you if you do bad things. He's like, no. That's like what? Right? Or to say that, at the same time it's vanity that people get away with this and they do evil over and over again. It's also something that's vanity. We can't rely on that either, right? But there is something in here where he's talking about, I wouldn't say it's like the patience of virtue, that, virtue or reality or God is somehow patient and giving people chances again and again. In a way, it's kind of like through the failure to execute and punish evil, that people's hearts become hardened and they do wrong over and over and over again, right? So I think it kind of goes both ways. I know very well that happiness is reserved for those who fear God because they fear him, that there will be no happiness for the wicked man, and that he will only eke out his days like a shadow because he does not fear God. All right, so fear of God. Definitely, I feel a little hesitant around this concept. I would say the whole concept of guilt and shame and using this threat, like God will punish you for doing, this sin that you happen to like or whatever, God is going to punish you and, for who you are or something like that. And, that's kind of, it seems to be used like as, by institutions to gain power for themselves, right? And so this whole idea of fear of God is, a little bit, my back's a little bit against the wall with it. At the same time, so then you see people, well, they explain it by kind of sort of playing it down, it seems like, no, it's not really fear, being afraid of God. It's more like wonder and awe, more like, oh, wow, God is so incredible and like, he's so beautiful and perfect that it makes people afraid of him. Makes sinners afraid of him, or is kind of he's a kind of a terrifying entity. I guess if God is God like a being, like one among many. God is kind of a very powerful being who, he's very scary. He's a terrifying experience to encounter God. Okay. I think we're getting closer there, but still, I see this. I do appreciate what Ecclesiastes is saying here, though. Like, it's not like, if you do a bad thing, then a bad thing is going to happen to you. Like, and that he is frustrated with that. He's saying that's vain. It's frustrating that that's not the case, but it's not the case. So he's saying fear God for another reason. Maybe that is, a person's heart being hardened, and they do evil 100 times, and they become evil, and they judge themselves. They walk away from that path of goodness, right? And they become more entrenched in that, and he's saying they do face judgment of some sort. But there is a vanity found on earth. The good, receive the treatment the wicked deserve, and the wicked the treatment the good deserve. This too, I say, is vanity. So he's frustrated. At the same time, he's like, this is what happens. Joy, then, is the object of my praise, since under the sun there is no happiness for man except in eating, drinking, and pleasure. This is his standby in his toil through the days of life God has given him under the sun. Again, in those earlier instances, the book talked about eat, drink, and enjoy work. Here he's talking about toil and kind of like pleasure. Eat, drink, and have pleasure in that context is have joy, right? So that certainly it's harkening back to that sensuous pleasure that the author engaged in and explored and said, hey, there's something to this. There's something here. But also could be there's a pleasure in wisdom, right? And that's, I don't know if pleasure is the right word, maybe a lack of pain, maybe mitigating pain. There's that experience he's starting to talk about, like person getting blindsided by the evil snare of the vanity of life, being like trapped, not being protected, being caught off guard because, I relied on this and then, bad fortune fell upon me. I thought there was a purpose in my life. I thought everything had a purpose, and then bam, smacks you right in the face. He's like, so there is a pleasure in someone saying it how it is. Listen, everything you try to rely on is like not there. It's like grasping at the wind. There's nothing you can rely on for sure. Everything is vanity. It's frustrating. It's empty. And just someone saying that can be very comforting to someone in that difficult moment, if that makes sense. But eating, drinking, and pleasure is his standby in his toil through the days of life God has given him under the sun. The sun is hot. Wisdom having been my careful study, I came to observe the business that goes on here on earth. And certainly the eyes of man are never rest, day and night. And I look at the work of God. Plainly, no one can discover what the work is that goes on under the sun, or explain why man should toil to seek, yet never discover. Not even a sage can discover it, though he may claim to know. So there's a sense, so he's talking about restlessness. People are not resting, and people are for some reason, seeking to understand what is happening under the sun, like what occurs, what's real. And no one can really figure it out for sure, he's saying. For I have reflected on all this and come to understand that the virtuous and the wise, with all they do, are in the hand of God. Man does not know what love is, or hate, and both of these in his eyes are vanity. So it's interesting the kind of way he said that. He didn't say love and hate are vanity. He said love and hate in people's eyes are vanity. So we experience them as vanity. So there's a bit of a nuance there. Maybe referring to the love and hate of God, as it were. God's love as seen through his gifts to people, the pleasures, the joys, the food and the drink, and God's hate, as it were, seen in making people's lives miserable and crooked. Just as one fate comes to all, to virtuous as to wicked, to clean and unclean, to him who sacrifices and him who does not sacrifice. So it is with the good man and the sinner, with him who takes an oath and him who shrinks from it. This is the evil that inheres in all that is done under the sun, that one fate comes to all. Further, that the hearts of men should be full of malice, that they should practice such extravagances toward the living in their lifetime and the dead thereafter. So he's talking about love and hate, and then he's talking about one fate coming to good and evil, virtuous, people who are ritually clean and unclean, who are offering sacrifices or making oaths to God, who are not doing that. One fate for everybody. And meanwhile, some people are so full of malice and showing hatred toward one another. We're all the same. And or showing such extravagances towards one another. So vain. For anyone who is linked with all that live still has some hope, a live dog being better than a dead lion. The living at least know they will die. The dead know nothing. No more reward for them. Their memory has passed out of mind. Their loves, their hates, their jealousies, all these have perished. Nor will they ever again take part in what is done under the sun. All right, so this sounds a little brutal to me. What's the benefit of life? Okay, he's saying life is better than death. So earlier he said he praises the dead because of that experience of misery and oppression. And then he said, we don't know what happens after death. And then he said the day of death is better than the day of life. Now he's saying life itself is better than death because at least the living know they will die. A live dog is better than a dead lion. That image of a dog, probably represents sort of a miserable existence, like scraping by, as it were. And the lion is like royalty. So like someone who's scraping by, at least is better than a dead king. Because a person who's scraping by, at least they can hate people. At least they can feel jealousy. At least they know they're going to die. At least they can experience love. So it's a little brutal. And those who have perished, they'll have no part in anything that takes place under the sun. They have nothing else. There's nothing for them. Just nothing. Go eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a glad heart. For what you do, God has approved beforehand. Wear white all the time. Do not stint your head of oil. Spend your life with the woman you love, through all the fleeting days of the life God has given you under the sun. This is the lot assigned to you in life and in the efforts you exert under the sun. Okay, this is quite an interesting passage here, beautiful, I think. Go eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a glad heart. And for what you do, God has approved beforehand. So this seems to be something like a blessing. He's sort of saying like, okay, I've given you this wisdom now. Now go. Now just go live your life, okay? Go enjoy your life. Drink wine, eat food, live with a man or woman you love. Right? This is your lot. God has already approved it. There does seem to be a question, does God love me or does God hate me? Is God, like sin is a mystery, as I read it here. He talks about sin sometimes, and it seems to be like sin is very clear cut, but really it's sort of like a mystery. Like, what is sin? You want to he's like, you want to grasp on sin? Like, that's vain also. Sin is a mystery, and trying to define what that is. And it's sort of like, okay, is God giving me these pleasures? Like, am I supposed to have fun with life? Am I supposed to enjoy my life? Or is God like testing me and judging me and hating me all the while? And I'm full of shame and guilt. And the author is saying here, God has approved, what you do, God has approved beforehand. So like there's some level of, we can't know. We can't hold on for sure. We can't know for sure. But God has already blessed you. You have already been approved, right? So I think it's a beautiful blessing. I like it. He's saying, go celebrate. Put oil on your head and wear white. That white in maybe a hot climate. White could keep you cooler. It's clean. It's like special clothing for a festival or something like that. Go celebrate. Go live with the person you love. But, of course, keep in mind through your fleeting days of life, right, that God has given you in the midst of your toil. Like, remember that it's vain, right? Whatever work you propose to do it while you can, for there is neither achievement, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in Sheol, where you are going. Sheol is like the land of the dead. At the same time, I think he's also saying, okay, and also caution, don't be like a sluggard. Don't be like just doing nothing. Like, still work hard. He really does value work, right? He's also saying, like, you're going to also not have any chance to plan or do anything when you're dead. So, do some stuff too. Chance. I see this too under the sun. The race does not go to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. There is no bread for the wise, wealth for the intelligent, nor favor for the learned. All are subject to time and mischance. All right, so of course we think, a strong person is likely to beat a weak person. A fast person is likely to win a race against a slow person. But he's saying, don't rely on any of that stuff. Like, don't rely on anything. It's all vain. There's chance, there's mischance, there's luck, right? And so, don't rely on anything like that, right? Maybe we would think normally a person who is very skilled will be favored. They'll be well liked by other people, but maybe not. Wealth for the intelligent. Yeah, usually if you're intelligent, you're more wealthy, right? But maybe bad luck, so sad. Man does not know his hour, like fish caught in the treacherous net, like birds taken in the snare. So was man overtaken by misfortune, suddenly falling on him. So he's giving us like a warning a little bit about, remember, life is vain. Nothing's reliable. I observe another evil under the sun, to me a grave one. There was a small town with only a few inhabitants. A mighty king marched against it, laid siege to it, and built great siege works around it. But a poverty-stricken sage confronted him, and by his wisdom saved the town. No one remembered this poor man afterward. Now I say, wisdom is better than strength. But a poor man's wisdom is never valued, and his words are disregarded. The gentle words of the wise are heard above the shouts of a king of fools. Better wisdom than warlike weapons, but one mistake undoes a great deal of good. Undoes a deal of good. Sorry about that. So this example, there's this poor man. He saves a city, and no one cares about him. No one listens to him because he's poor. Well, too bad. It's so sad. Bad luck. He was wise, but he didn't get riches, so nobody considered what he was saying. He's so called saying, like, this is a terrible example of, like, this is terrible to me. This is, like, brutal. All right, guys, so that's the end of chapter 9. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.